Hello, everyone. Good evening, morning. She's in Japan. Hello, welcome back to Britton's Hangout Hour, episode 85. I think. Let me check. Yeah, we're at 85 now. I can't even believe it. We're this far already. But I'm
It's
here
impressive.
today with Taylor from Maed Between The Pages. With I'm
Hi,
guessing
everyone.
is Maid your last name, and that's just like a pun.
Yeah, it's actually my middle name. So, yes, it is a pun. I decided to, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And now I get a lot of people, asking me why. And it's a lot harder to search my channel than I think I expected in the beginning. But yeah, it's a pun, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I guessed. I guessed it had to do with your name, but
Yeah.
I
You
um
know.
I similarly, I've had people go like, "So why some Okie dude?" And I'm like, I just thought it'd be funny. Like, real. That's the simple answer, really. It had a
Did
nice
you?
ring to it. It was kind of
Mm.
funny, you know. So I'm like, all right, people will remember it, you know.
Did you originally like conceptualize your channel as a book channel and you just decided to make a name that didn't, indicate that right away, or was it a channel for a bunch of things?
Well, I did start a BookTube channel. I guess you could call it a BookTube channel. It was kind of just me rambling about books and comics I enjoyed, and then
Mm,
I'm like, this sucks, and I stopped doing that for a while. And
I see.
I basically used it for like my podcasting stuff. I've ran a couple of podcasts, and then I've had some friends who were like, "Well, why don't you just start a BookTube channel? Like you're passionate about this stuff." And I was like, nah, I don't know. I did it, and I didn't really like it all that much. And then I've said this before, but I saw Brian Lee Durfee.
Mm,
I've seen like Brian Lee Durfee and people just sitting there on their iPhone talking about
yeah,
books. I'm like, I got no excuse. So here I am
yeah,
now.
yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the hardest barriers to entry to YouTube is yourself, right? So a lot of people, myself included, wanted it to be right the first time, and then it's cliche at this point, but it is true, which is why everyone says it. You just have to start. Like your first, in my opinion, if your first video doesn't make you cringe a little bit, then you haven't grown enough, right? You got to give yourself room to
You're
grow.
not doing it
So,
right. Yeah, I watched my first video I did back on this channel. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It was for a book I
hmm
didn't like, unfortunately.
uh-huh.
But
Well, you were already knew what the algorithm liked at that point, so that's a good start.
yeah, I've been slowly getting an audience. It's felt good, you know.
hmm hmm Yeah, I think slow growth, it depends on the channel, right? Some people really just have one video that takes off and then they shoot into the stratosphere, and that's a wonderful way to build your channel. But a lot of people, myself included, in those like this group of people, it's a slow growth of your channel, but I find that that type of growth allows you to become closer to a lot of people, little by little. So I've been really grateful for that kind of experience, the slow experience.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, you run a YouTube channel. You also talk with people. Didn't you host the that religion chat a few weeks ago?
I didn't, but my co-host was a big part of that. So you probably
Oh,
saw me like retweet about it and everything, which is why
okay.
it looked like, I was part of it. But it was my co-host from Page Chewing, the interview series that I do. He was
Okay.
part of that. So I was shouting about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought you hosted on your channel. I must have been mistaken.
Oh no, I
Um,
wish I did. It's such an interesting topic.
um, but yeah, so you're on the fantasy booktube sphere, and I'll admit I haven't watched too much of your channel, so I thought maybe we get to know each other a little bit today.
Sure, sure. I'm honored.
So yeah, so you like
Yeah.
fantasy, I guess. I'm guessing.
Yes, yes, that's definitely my wheelhouse. I read other things. I dabble in horror, lit fic. I like classics. I read a lot of Victorian literature in university. So I really, that when I say classics, that's the area that I know the most about. But yeah, I dabble in a lot of things. I read a lot of translated fiction as well. As you mentioned earlier, I do live in Japan, so I read a lot of translated Japanese fiction.
Yeah, that was the
I
fun
do.
part about getting this together. It's like, what time are we gonna do it?
Yes, yeah. Thank you for being flexible and being
I
able to
didn't
move
want
some
you
things
waking me
around.
up in the morning like, hey, are we doing this? I'm like, oh man,
Yeah,
I misread the
yeah.
time.
Time zones are the bane of my existence, and that's someone who's hosted interviews for at least 2 years now, pretty regularly. They're just not fun. And in Japan, no one matches my time zone, like, ever. So I'm always up early or up late for interviews, pretty much.
I have a friend who went to Korea a couple
Mm,
times this year for
mm.
his first work. It's like, how was that? I was like, oh yeah, we had tea. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I've only been to Korea once because where I live in Japan is Fukuoka, so it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to South Korea. So I have gone once, but I went specifically for hiking. So I didn't like explore the city so much. I kind of went straight to the place I wanted to hike, which was on Jeju Island. So I haven't seen too much of South Korea proper, I guess you could say. I just spent a night there, but it was really fun when I was there for sure. Yeah, they have good food.
I've yet to go out of. I've yet to go across the pond. I would like to go to like
Mm,
England at some point
mm, mm, mm.
because I have some friends
Yeah,
over there, and
yeah.
yeah. So you run a
Travel.
lot of like podcasting stuff. You got a series
Yeah.
called Page Chewing. Got
Hmm.
whiskey and books, which relatable. You know, I actually this week I've had 4 podcasts this week, which is kind of
Mm.
a lot for me. I usually do
Yeah.
3. Like the most I'll do is 3, but I did 4 because
Mm. Mm. Mm.
you know.
Well, I would definitely be interested to know about the other stuff that you host as well. But for my end, yeah, Page Chewing is a live interview series that was started from or by Steve Talks Books about 3 years ago, and then he brought
Oh, that
PL
must have been
Stewart.
who the. I don't mean to interrupt, but that must
Yeah,
have been who hosted the religion chat. It was Steve.
it was no, it was PL. So yeah,
Son of a
so
bitch.
Steve is the one who it's okay. Steve is the one who started it, right? And
Oh,
then
okay.
he's kind of taken a hiatus from the YouTube space. He still does podcasts and stuff like that. But he brought on PL and I ahead of time. And then the two of us took over the YouTube sphere. So PL is the one that I'm always interviewing with. And he's the one that hosted that religion chat. So we have 2 sections of that interview series. We have title series and chapter series. Title series is like one-on-one, kind of big name one-on-one interviews. We've talked to some pretty amazing people on there, like, you know, just people that I never thought that I would be able to connect with. Fonda Lee, you can see behind me. I love her series. You know, we've had her
Yeah,
on.
I
Tad
see you have
Williams.
Fonda Lee on here. So I have a friend,
Yeah.
Josh Pantaloresco, who
Mm,
talked to her before she kind of blew up.
mm,
So I always
yeah.
think that's fun.
Oh, it's so much fun to be able to talk to authors about, what their process is. So, and then chapter series is more shooting the shit a little bit. We have a group of people and we all just kind of hang out. So it's usually group based. So
Mm.
yeah, so I do that, and then the whiskey and books talk about shooting the shit. We just get online and we just have a dram. We talk about whatever we want to talk about.
But yeah, it seems you've talked to a lot of people. I'm. Is it P Deji? Because I'm thinking of Comedy Shorts Gamer here.
P.
But
Jelly Clark, I think is who.
Jelly, his name's
Jelly,
Jelly.
yeah, the D is silent.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay. I
yeah.
hope he does not blast me on Twitter.
Oh, he won't. He won't.
That's
He
good.
is such a kind human. Um, but yeah, P. Jelly Clark wrote. You can see some of his books back here. He wrote the A Master of Gin book, which I think is probably his most famous. But he has a lot of other really good short fiction in that world. And then he's part of a couple anthologies. He's also written a middle grade, so he kind of goes all over the place. But
I
the
know he
most
wrote
popular.
Ring
Mm,
Shout.
yes, yes, yes. He wrote Ring Shout. Yep. And I think that one's probably the biggest one outside of the fantasy community, for sure. I haven't read Ring Shout yet, but I really want to. But I've read everything in his Dead Gin world, and it's fantastic.
Fair enough. I haven't actually read him yet, but I've seen his book. Like I'll go to the bookstore and I
Mm.
see his book staring at me. I'll be like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. Highly recommend. I mean, he has a short story free on Tor.com that you could always start there and see if you like what he does because it's free. So um, that would be my
But
suggestion.
but yeah, you talked to a lot of people. It looks like. So yeah,
Hmm.
I actually was talking to Adrian Gibson
Ah,
on
another
Wednesday.
wonderful human. Yeah.
It was interesting because we like a lot of the same stuff. So we had an interesting
Mm-mm.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a very interesting human. He, does tattooing, podcasting, art. He does a little bit of everything.
Yeah, my
So
parents
he's
asked me when I had the podcast with him. He's like, "So, what'd you guys talk about?" And I'm like, "Well, we talked about his book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, what inspired him?" I'm like, "Oh, just some books that we both enjoy and a lot of hallucinogens. Oh,
yes,
and fungi."
yes, yes. Fungi and hallucinogens. That's his home base.
I'm like, "All right," and they're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm. So,
it's always
what
fun
about?
when me and my parents talk about podcasting.
Yeah, I feel like it's an art. So it's when someone asks you what do you talk about and you say something like fungi or their book or whatever, it sounds very out of place, but there's a reason you got there throughout the podcast, right? It's
Yeah,
hard to get context, but
yeah, it's like, oh man, how do I describe it? Like yesterday, I talked to my friend AJP, and
mm,
we were just kind of shooting the breeze about just stuff we like, comics, and we
hmm
were, we were talking about Iceberg Slim yesterday, who is
I've never heard of
an
that. What's that?
He's an African American author. He used to be a pimp, and he wrote a book about it called Pimp, which is a fantastic book. And we were just kind of we were basically talking about how like it's a really messed up book, but we really like it a lot.
Mm, 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 mm. Yeah, those two things are not mutually exclusive, definitely,
Yeah, no.
especially in the horror genre.
And we were talking about like why a lot of authors seem to be so screwed up. At least the older ones,
Mm.
anyway. I don't want to speak about the new ones.
Well, that's been a trope for a long time, right? The tortured artist.
Yes.
Oh, yes. But what have you been reading recently?
Oh, I've been sort of on a slump, but at the same time, I've been trying to like keep up. The one I'm reading right now is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This big
Oh,
puppy right here. Yeah, I'm like, oh god, like a third of the way through it.
yeah, that's a chonker. How's it going in general?
Oh, I'm liking it. I'm not. It's one of those weird books. Like I'm liking it, but like I'm not on the loving it yet.
Mm, mm,
We'll
mm,
see
mm.
how it goes. But it's really good. Like if you like old like Charles Dickens or
Mm-hmm.
Victorian England and
Yeah.
magic, then magical elements are really cool in this book.
Mm, mm, mm.
There's also a lot of
Yep.
footnotes.
Oh, it's one of those. Lots of footnotes. Yeah. Yeah, I read a lot of Victorian literature, so I've always been interested in it. And I adore Pure Nessie by Clark. It's one of my favorite books. So I definitely want to read more of her stuff. It's
This
just,
one's way
it's
different
so good.
from Paranasi. Like Paranasi is like very like straightforward and like
Hmm.
straightforward. There's a lot of weirdness in that book too, but like this one is like maximalist, like
Mm.
I don't want to. Well, that makes it sound like it's dense. Like it's not that hard of a read, but if you're familiar with like the Victorian style, you'll probably get it. And it's
Yeah,
fine.
Bleak House.
Yeah,
I read Bleak House once, and once is enough. Check that box.
I haven't actually read that one yet. I've read the Tale of Two Cities and
Hmm.
Oliver
Yeah.
Twist, which is one of my favorite stories of all time, and A Christmas
I've
Carol.
never read Oliver Twist, if you can believe it. Of all
Oh,
the other
what?
stuff
It's such a
I've read.
great book.
I know. I know. It's like a huge gap in my classics knowledge. Um, but yeah, it's something that I would definitely want to pick up. That's cool that it's one of your favorites, though.
Yeah,
I'm a
no.
big fan of The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I like that one
Oh
a lot.
yes, I still need to read Wilkie Collins. I think him and Dickens were friends, actually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that lore. Uh,
Um, yeah, but apparently he's very influential in the mystery genre.
hmm Yes. Yeah. Well, and don't quote me on this, but I feel like I did read somewhere that he was one of the first people to use the current tropes for mystery books that we use today. He's one of the people who really kind of made those the blueprint. So yeah, definitely influential. Whether that quote is correct or not of him being one of the first, he has that reputation. Yeah. So I only read The Moonstone once. So it's one of those books I'm kind of afraid to read again because I'm like, am I going to like it as much the
I
second time
know
I read it?
it's
I
that's me
hope
with
so.
That's like me with American Gods, because I read that when I was in senior year of high school, and it was like a magical experience. And I'm like, I don't know if I
Mm.
want to read it again. I don't know if it'll
Yeah.
be as good this time around.
Yeah. Some things are best left alone, right?
Yeah, but I love that book a lot. It was really
Mm-mm.
good. But yeah,
Yeah.
I see you've talked to a lot of people. You've talked to Jimmy and Alan.
Yep. Yep. Both really good people, good friends of mine. I was actually lucky enough to meet Jimmy because my parents are still stateside, right? So
Mm.
sometimes I go back, especially now that they have a granddaughter. They want us to come back as often as possible. So we went back for about a month and a half. And during that time, I was able to meet Jimmy. So he's just as great in person as he seems online. Really good guy.
Yeah, I can confirm he's a good guy. I've had him on my channel a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We disagree on the Green Bone Saga, which means that he's wrong, but that's okay. I'll allow
You know,
it.
I'm like, I keep telling him, I'm like, you should like call yourself like the literature network now, and he's like,
Mm. Yeah, rebranding is a pain in the butt. I don't blame
yeah,
him.
no, it's he did recently read Black Leopard and Red Wolf the other day,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
he liked it much to my edification because I love that book, and it's one of those I wish BookTube talked more about. But oh well.
Yeah, I've never picked it up. Yeah. I've
And
heard from several people though that it's a trip of a book.
I can confirm it is a trippy book. It is weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I enjoy it because I'm kind of weird. I like unconventional books. So,
Mm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
I do like First Law and Gentleman Bastard. So I'm not a complete hipster.
Well, Gentleman Bastards, I mean, come on. It is one of my favorite series of all time, but it's one of those books that I've reread it twice, but a long time ago before I really did my channel.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you have books like that as well, where you read something and then you love it, but it's before the channel, so you don't talk about it as much because it's not what you're reading recently. So I haven't talked about Gentleman Bastards in a long time, but it is one of my favorite series. Same with Six of Crows. I adore that series, but I don't talk about it that much.
Yeah, it's me with like Oliver Twist and like Tom Sawyer. Like I'm like I gotta
Mhm.
reread those again and then I'll talk about them. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree because you have you love them, but the details get fuzzy. The longer.
Yeah. Or Game of Thrones. Like I'd like to do a
Mm.
I want to do a Game of Thrones reread because I remember I was reading through it the other day. I was kind of going through
Mm.
some parts and there's some parts in there I forgot about. I was like, "Oh, wow, this
Hmm.
is great." I forget about this.
Yeah, yeah. If it's been long enough, it's almost like you get to read it for the first time again, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, it can be a double-edged sword, right? You can like it as much as before or not. So there's a risk with rereading, but that's something that I've wanted to make more time for recently because BookTube really pushes you to read the next book and the next book and the next book to have something new to talk about. So I've been wanting to make more time for rereading.
Yeah, and also I talk about like, I talk about crime fiction, so I mean, I'm actually about to start The Power of the Dog soon.
Never
So
heard of that.
hopefully, if Carlos and Yolanda are watching this from StoryTube, I'm starting this soon. I'm sure they'll love to hear that.
Yeah.
And like sci-fi and westerns. I covered a western
Mm.
the other day. Yeah, it always makes me sad when I see like people on BookTube being like, "Oh man, western not my thing." I'm like, great stuff.
Well, yeah, I guess I can't say much about the genre. The first Western I ever read was actually recently for Spiffbo, because I'm also a Spiffbo judge, so self-published fantasy blog off.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah. I was gonna talk to you about
Yeah,
that, but yeah, what book was it?
Cold West by Clayton Snyder.
Oh yeah, I actually I've talked to a couple of indie authors. He is one of them that
Mm.
I've talked to.
Oh, another great human. You're in the right circles, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, for as gracious as he is in interviews or as kind as he is, that book is brutal. So just be ready when you're reading it. He goes in. So it never stops to breathe, and it does what it does really well, but it doesn't apologize for what it is, which is just lots of violence, lots of just
I,
mm,
I don't
yeah.
I don't
I don't
mind
want to give too
violence
much
so much. Now, like sexual
away.
violence,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not. It won't turn me away from a book, but I don't like reading about it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, as someone who reads grimdark as well, I definitely understand the place that violence can have in a story. And this one does, it's not gratuitous. Cold West is not gratuitous. It has a purpose. I was just like, okay, Clayton, when I was reading it as a judge. So I do think that might not be the best poster child for all Westerns, because I think he's trying to do something very specific with the story, and that just so happened to be like where it took place. So I can't say too much about Westerns personally, but I would be open.
I'll admit, I'm more familiar with Western films than literature, so. Which I thought it was kind of, I don't know if you've talked to Tori Tekken, I've hope. Yeah,
Yeah.
she likes Young Guns a lot, and she was all like, she didn't care for The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. That made me feel kind of sad because I think it's a great film. Though
go ahead.
I like Once Upon a Time in the West a lot better. So there you go. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. Too much of a nerdy...
I don't know movies very well,
Fair enough.
I would be learning if we went into that.
I mean, I won't get into that.
Okay.
I won't get into that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Rob J. Hayes. I've actually wanted to talk to that guy
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, Rob's great. I read his War Eternal series, the first one being Along the Razor's Edge, and just fell in love with it. That is it's one of the few series that I think stuck the landing in basically every way possible. But what I enjoy so much about that series as a whole is, from the first book to the last book, I would bet probably every single penny of my savings you couldn't guess what happens, but in the end, because he makes so many twists and turns and unique choices with his characters that
not enough to stretch plausibility, I hope. Not enough to stretch plausibility, I hope.
No, it all makes sense within the world that he's set up. But he just makes so many interesting and not conventional choices with what he decides for the plot. So I adored that series all the way through. And then after reading the first book, I was like, we gotta get this man on page doing. So, and then I was very lucky. Mahir from Fantasy Book Critic wanted to do a celebration of 10 years, a decade of Rob J. Hayes, because he celebrated a decade not too long ago, and asked me to be a part of that. So all the credit for that goes to Mahir. But I was able to talk to him for that recently as well. So he's been putting out books for a hot minute.
Yeah, I think he's on. I think he's on Alan's. He's on someone's Discord. So maybe I'll find him. Maybe I'll track him down.
Yeah, he's fun to talk to.
Anyway,
he's actually also one of the only people, not one of, the only person who's ever actually chewed a page on page doing. He ripped out a page of one of his books and he ate it and he signed it, and we had a giveaway. And one of our viewers got this special copy of Along the Razor's Edge with the page missing. He actually chewed a page. Like he
the full page?
Yeah, he ripped it out, put it in his mouth.
I guess if it's your book. Yeah.
Signed it. I was like, yeah, and you put your money where your mouth is.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It was a really fun interview.
I bet you were just sitting there like, when I came up with that title, it wasn't what I was going at, but okay.
Yeah. Well, we kind of joked about it on Twitter ahead of time. He's like, should I actually chew a page? I'm like, I mean, your body, your choice. You want to chew a page? Yeah. Have at it. So.
Fair enough. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting site, though. Is that like on one of your streams or?
Yeah. So I have a whole playlist of all the page chewing episodes. So they're all in one place. So it would be a title series episode. You can see it there. Yeah.
I see. So I guess, well, what is it that you do on your channel exactly?
Yeah.
Aside from, talking to people.
Yeah. Yeah, so page chewing is the live series that I do. And then on Maed Between the Pages, I do book reviews, book hauls. I do sometimes tag videos, not so much anymore, but those are fun sometimes, and discussion videos. And then my most popular videos are probably my reading vlogs, which are a combination of me reading and giving my thoughts and reviews as I'm working my way through books rather than kind of as a collective and a wrap up, and also my life in Japan. So I'll show, going out to dinner or places that we visit or any travel that we do. It's all kind of mixed together. So it's a reading, vlog, Japan life kind of mix. And those are probably the most popular that I do. Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
How'd you end up in Japan anyway? I mean,
That. Yeah. I guess it was a life. It took most of my life to end up living here, but I was very lucky when I was in elementary school, early elementary school, maybe like third grade or so. My dad, his job was working with a Japanese company, so he works with NASA, so he was working with JAXA. And so he would come over to do business stuff. And once when he came over, my mom and I were like, hey, you want to come too? So we did a family trip. And my memories of Japan from that time were just wonder, because it was so different from anything I had known so far in my young little life. I was terrified of the food. A lot of the fish had heads, and I didn't like that. But I just kind of became enamored with the country. And then because of that, I ended up studying abroad in high school. And that time, I didn't choose where I was going to stay, but my company put me in Fukuoka. So I fell in love with Fukuoka living here. I don't have anything against Tokyo or Osaka or any other larger places, but just something about Fukuoka just kind of stuck with me. So then, went back to the States, went to university, traveled, did other things. And then after working in the States for a while, I was looking into leaving my job at the time, and I thought, why not? Why not go back to Japan? It's been a minute. so, there was a teacher that I had met through my host family when I studied abroad in high school. I helped teach her English class, and she remembered me, and she said, hey, my company's actually looking for a teacher. Do you want to come work for us? And that Fukuoka and teaching. And I was like, absolutely. So I came here and met my husband, and I've been here for over 8 years now.
well, once you got married, that must have been like game over. Like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, my
Guess
parents might have held up hope I was coming home, but then when I got married, they're probably like, yeah, all right.
Very, very nice. My cousin actually got married almost a year ago now. That was weird because she's younger than me, so
Everyone has their own timeline.
Yeah.
I didn't get married until way later in life. I wasn't ready for it. So
they live out in Tuttle, Oklahoma.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like it's about like it's a couple miles from here. It's not too far away. It's like 15, 20 minutes away.
Was it a fun wedding?
Yeah, really hot though.
Mm.
It was.
Is it already? Is it already that hot?
It was in August. So.
Oh yeah. August weddings.
I was sweating. Oh, I sweat really easily, so it was bad.
That's brave.
I know.
Have an August wedding.
It was a beautiful ceremony though. It was a great ceremony.
Oh, good for them. Good for them. Yeah, we it was during the pandemic when we got married, so it was just like a signing the documents. So we didn't get to throw a big party.
I didn't have like flowers, and I've heard Japan. I've seen photos of Japan, and it looks really nice out there. Seems like a nice place to have a wedding. I'm just saying.
It is very nice. Yeah. There's usually people do two styles. Usually they do one of each, but one will be the traditional Japanese style, which is usually like Shinto based and wear a kimono and all of that. And that's more private with just family. And then they have like the Western style wedding with the white dress, and then everyone comes over and parties. So they usually have the both. Yeah.
You gotta keep some traditions alive.
Yeah, Japan is very interesting with that. They it's one of the things I love the most about this country is you'll have this hundreds of years old shrine next to a skyscraper, and they just coexist. Like, they don't really, no one thinks it's weird to have that. So I find that dichotomy of Japan super, super interesting.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to get back to book talk, I often ask
Yeah.
authors that I have on, but I guess I'll ask you because you're a booktuber who reads mostly fantasy. But what draws you to the fantastic?
It's a really good question. Um, I think, of course, depending on what's going on in my personal life, it could be a mode of escapism at certain times.
Mm.
But I think maybe the main anchor, the main draw is to be able to. I often talk about fantasy as like a mirror. So to be able to view things through a different perspective or a different lens and then reflect it back on your life is something that I thoroughly enjoy. So if I'm reading something that's based in our world, like let's just say an urban fantasy, for example, I don't have anything against urban fantasy, but if it has a concrete setting, that comes with preconceptions or on my
Mm.
part, and
Mm-hmm.
that can affect the way that I view the story. But
So,
if it's
so no
something
Dresden
that
Files for you?
I haven't read Dresden,
Oh,
but
okay.
I have nothing against it. I just haven't taken it on. I mean,
I
Green
haven't
Bone,
either.
this is like the millionth time I've mentioned it, but Green Bone is also urban fantasy, but it takes place in a fantastical, urban setting. But yeah, I would be open to Dresden. But I think for me, having that fantastical location kind of allows me to broaden my perspective and then take on different views, see things in a different way. So I think that's probably the core.
That's interesting. I mean, I remember Philip Chase,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Philip Chase, saying something like fantasy is the literature of reconnection because I was kind of
Mm.
flubbing it the other day and then someone was like reconnection. So yeah, it reminds me of that, what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I just said it
Oh,
reminded me of that. You know,
oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
finished my thought.
That definitely resonates with me for sure. Because even if you're from disparate communities or cultures, you can connect through a story. Like, it's just such a innate part of the human condition. It's just what we do. We tell stories, and it's how we connect to each other. So whether it be an oral tradition, written tradition, visual through movies and other video games, other media. Um, I think that his quote really resonates with me. I think that really that connects to what I was saying about it being something that allows you to reflect on your own perspective and maybe connect with someone that has a different one.
Yeah, and I think that's what good literature should do in general, because
Mm-hmm.
because you're kind of getting a look into another world, I guess, or another person's perspective of our world if you read regular
Yeah,
old fiction.
yeah. I mean, I think that can apply to books in general, for sure. But the fantastical setting, yeah, I think that's what pulls me specifically to that. Is
Yeah,
it's a
I
me
like.
problem that I
Yeah,
can't, disconnect from
yes, I
something
like
else.
being whisked away to other worlds. I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
there's that childlike wonder of wanting to be whisked away to somewhere else.
Oh, for sure.
Falling
That
down the
wonder.
rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, world building is one of my favorite aspects for that. Like, give me all of the why can market scenes. Like, when we find a market in a city, I'm like, yes. Tell me all about the spices and the vendors and the tents. Like, I will eat that up every single time.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was having a bit of an argument with some friends of mine the other day about like what fantasy actually is, and we couldn't like make up our
Mm.
minds on it. We
It's
couldn't.
kind of nebulous, and it depends on what type of definition you're trying to like nail down. But yeah, it's kind of nebulous because it can contain so much.
Yeah, I
Um,
know. There's so much. To, like there's some people might say it's mythological fiction, and then you're like, oh well, there's some other stuff you're kind of pulling from, so maybe not real. You could nitpick stuff to death. I mean, I saw on Josh Red Fury Books' channel.
Mm.
He did a discussion, or he was moderating a discussion about classic fantasy and whatever that means, which I
Yeah.
thought was a really interesting um, conversation. Though they didn't bring up the freaking quest narrative. How did they
They
not?
didn't?
No. At least I might need to watch it again because I watched it last weekend, but they didn't mention it. Like they were talking about
Mm-hmm.
like AP Canavan was going on. He's all like, oh yeah, there's all
Mm-hmm.
these different styles. I'm like, what about the quest narrative? That's like the oldest fantasy story. Let's go on an
Yeah.
adventure to go do something. Like, come on,
Right.
come on.
Yeah. That actually really reminds me, though, and I know that you're also. I've seen you mention T. Kingfisher before, and I just recently read Nettle and Bone by
Mm.
T. Kingfisher, and I wasn't interested in their works, but after reading that book, 5 stars, fantastic. It was incredible. So after reading that book, it reminded me of the quest narrative, right? Because some fairy tale adjacent tales have that as well. Like a lot of people think of epic fantasy as being the quest narrative, right? But in Nettle and Bone, I mean, we very much go on a quest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just reminding me of that book because I recently read it. But I do think that even if you're talking about that as a big core part of fantasy, that can include some stories that maybe some other people might not realize or think of, you know?
It's like, yeah, I'm calling you out, AP. Comment down below.
That man will take a challenge. He's not free. He's going to come for you. Better watch out. He's not as nice as Philip.
Oh yeah, I talked with him a few months ago. I had to I had to laugh at some of his. He's just like, here you go. Here's what I
Yep.
think.
Well,
Like
I
I
mean,
was
he has so much experience, PhD and
like literally, I was talking
all
about a
kinds of
friend of
narrative.
mine who's trying to who didn't like Malazan, Book of the
Mm.
Fallen. He's a big fan. I think AP's a fan.
Hmm.
I think he might be a fan. I've seen him
Maybe,
talk about it a
possibly.
little bit.
Maybe, possibly.
But I'm like, he's like, so like, who was telling you not to read it? I'm like, I'm not just saying like random idiots on the internet. I'm just like, there's
Hmm.
people I trust who say they do like it, and there's people who I trust who don't like it. So it's kind of hard. And I showed him a
Yeah.
video, and he literally was like, well, I don't think your friend is a very good reader. And I'm like, damn, dude. I couldn't help but laugh. I love my friend who he was talking about. I did push back a little bit, but I had to, he cracked me there. I was like,
dropping,
he just bluntly was like, well, you just can't read then. I'm like,
dropping the
okay.
mic.
I'm like,
Shots
okay.
fired. Yeah, he's a delight to talk to, though. He's great. But Malazan is something that I want to read, but there's such a zeitgeist around it. Like it's just so fraught with context and fandom that I'm like, do I really want to take this on?
I know.
One day I think I
That's
will,
I
but it's just not on
and
my
I get
radar right
irritated because there've been friends who've told me about like all the cool stuff that's in Malazan, and
now.
like a good
Hmm.
way to like sink me into something is tell me about cool stuff that's in the world. Like there's apparently dinosaurs with like with like sword arms. I'm like, why doesn't anyone talk about that? Everyone's always like,
Right?
oh, it's so difficult. Oh, you gotta follow along. You gotta pay attention. No one brings that up. Like no one brings up all the cool
The
stuff.
sword wielding dinosaurs. Yeah, that's a pretty big selling point, I would say.
Come on. Do better, Mal. I've said this before in the podcast. Do better, Malazan fans. I'm calling you out now. I'm firing shots all over this podcast today.
It's all right. It's all right. I won't retweet it. I won't subtweet you. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where when I end up reading it, I bet you, I'm gonna love it, and everyone's gonna be like, "See, you should have read it like years ago. Why were you being stubborn?" Like that's probably what's gonna happen. I'm just not ready to take it on yet.
Yeah, that was
So
like me with First Law. I picked it up. I picked up the blade itself, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll pick it up. And then like 2022, I was kind of, I didn't really know what to read next, and I was like, why not? So I
yeah,
picked it up, and I read it, and I was like, this is pretty good. Hey, what
yeah,
was like literally the first page I was in. I was like, oh man.
yeah. You basically took the thoughts out of my head and said them because I'm currently finishing up the last argument of Kings. via audio, of course. There, you can't do it any other way, right? With Pacey. So I am 89, 90% of the way through The Last Argument of Kings, and I felt the same way. I picked up the blade itself, and I was like, it's okay. Like, this is all right. Like, I know that you're supposed to hate Giselle, but I didn't care. So that was a third of the book that I didn't care about. Like, why is this man on my page again? Like, I don't care. So
I didn't actually hate him. I was kind of like, he just wants to. I'm not saying he's like a great guy or anything, but I'm like, he just wants to goof off and play cards with his friends. Is that so hard? Like, is that so bad? Like, sure, he's a bit conceited, but come on.
I think you're being kind by saying a bit. I think you're being very generous to him by saying a bit conceited.
He's very conceited. But, like, come on. Who wouldn't be when they're in that situation? I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think he's a believable character for sure. But yeah, so the first book was like, eh. And then I'm on the Broken Binding subscription. So I have the beautiful editions. And I was like, well, I need to at least read the next one to know if this is something I want to keep in my collection or, give these beautiful editions to someone who'll appreciate them. So I read Before They Are Hanged, and I was like, oh, sorry, guys, keeping these. Like, these aren't going to leave my library, because that was an amazing book. So I'm fully on board with Abercrombie now. He's a character work wizard.
Yes, he does very well with characterization and voice. I don't know how, but apparently he is. Or, well, not apparently, he is, because I've read his books.
Yeah. I was listening to the audiobook, and we were like reorganizing our whole house the last couple weeks, and I was just like laughing out loud. And of course my husband can't hear what I'm listening to. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. Just giggling by myself.
Well, when you say that, you're not helping your case.
Yeah, true. I'm not alone. I'm with the voices that I am hearing in my head,
In my headphones.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. No, but yeah, no, I enjoy those books. Same thing. I would say it was the same thing with Gentlemen Bastards, but like I read Lies, Locke, and More. I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. Then you get to that halfway point, and you're like, I'm in.
It takes off. Yeah, I definitely think that the beginning of Lies is you have to put trust in the author that he's taking you somewhere good, because he does just throw you in there. Lynch really does just say, okay, we're here now. And it's hard to ask for that trust if it's the first book in a series, right? So I understand why some people start it and they're like, yeah, nah, because, you make that judgment call. Whereas if it's a second or third book in a series, you're willing to give that trust.
All I'm saying is if you're not pumping your fist by, like, the time the book's over, then, like, go home. Like, it's not
right.
for you.
Yes, I agree.
Which was why I thought the third book was kind of a disappointment, because I'm like, I read these books because I want to see Locke and John get themselves into a situation, and I want to see how they're going to get out of it.
They're going to get out, yeah. Well, I don't know, is it?
Then he drops a Deus Ex Machina in the beginning of the book. You're like, come on, man.
Yeah, it made me wonder, just because he was so intricate with his plot and his building. I wonder if it's kind of like the Dandelion Dynasty. I don't know if you've read that one, but I scream about that series all the time. But there's Grace of Kings and then The Wall of Storms, and those are specifically, first book, second book in a series. And then the third book and the fourth book were written as one, but the publisher was like, you can't publish a book that big. Like, we're not doing it. So they split it. And so if you read the third book, it's like halfway through its arc, essentially. And then you have to read the fourth book to see how the arc was supposed to finish. But if you don't know that, you're going to read the third book and be like, what the hell? Like, this doesn't have the intricate plot points or payoff that I expected. So I'm not saying Scott Lynch was trying to do that for sure. I just wonder, because The Thorn of Emberlane took so long to come out. I don't know.
Though we may see some signs. I'm seeing some signs. Maybe we might be getting it, but
I talked about that in my recent vlog, because Broken Binding came out with the first 3, and I'm like, Matt, you know something? Someone else that I've been able to talk to on Page Doing, and I'm like, tell me the details, Of course, he's tight-lipped, but
what did he go like? I can't, legal reasons.
Yeah, Gallants as well. They released like nice editions of it. I'm like, see, big companies don't just do that for no reason though. I think there's a whisper network that knows something.
I hope so. I mean, I just started it last year, so I hope we get a new one out of it, because I don't
Yeah.
know if I can do a Game of Thrones again, man.
You know, I haven't. I'm part of the the group of people that hadn't read it, and then the show came out, and then I hated the ending so much that I was just like, I'm not saying the books are bad. I'm not saying that. I just didn't want to be back in that world. Maybe after enough time passes, I'll want to be back in the world and pick them up, but I've never actually read them.
Oh, they're fantastic books. Though I'd say they're a lot more intricate than the show, because the show kind of just dropped some things from the books, which, look, I get it on some levels. You can't do everything, and, whatever. But, yeah, no. There's some stuff they left out.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, I think
It's
that's
not just,
another
like,
one of
details.
those.
Like, there's whole plot lines that just get cut out for, they're kind of important to the story.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's another one of those kind of like Malazan where I'm gonna read it and be like, oh yeah, I love this. Yeah, I don't know why I waited so long. Like when I do, but it's another thing where it's just those are monsters to take on. So I'm just not.
I don't blame you. They're big boys.
Mm-hmm. I'm not opposed to big series. It's more like my goal this year is to finish out series that I had opened, and I think I made a video and I'm trying to remember the number. I think it was 57 open series. And so I cut half of them and said, I'm not finishing these, and these I'm finishing. But it was still like 20 something. So I'm trying to close some of those out.
Oh man, how many series am I on? So there's the Dark Star books. Then there is First Law, because I haven't read because I've only read the first trilogy and Best Served Cold. There's probably dozens others. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I had to go to Goodreads to check. Like, I don't remember.
There's
all
plenty
of them.
more I'd like to read, so there you go.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ones I'm hoping to finish out is one of my next reads is probably gonna be The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. So
I've been meaning to try the 5th season for several years. I was going to do it in COVID time, but then I got really depressed because the pandemic happened, and it wasn't.
Oh, but why would that have any effect on your mental health? What are you talking about? Stuck inside, that's fine.
I generally like being inside, but I like being inside with the option of leaving. Like
by choice. Exactly.
It's not as pleasurable when you can't leave.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I highly recommend the 5th season. It's one of those books where the ending I just stared at a wall for a hot minute. I was like, what did I? Oh my God. It took me about 5 minutes.
That was like me with Last Argument of Kings, though. It was me just like kicking and screaming on the ground, going like, no, because it's just. I mean, I don't know where you're at, but you said 90%, so I'm thinking you're at the part where you're finally just like, no.
I think I'm starting to get the reveals you're talking
where
about.
You're going to like start shouting at the clouds.
Yes,
anger.
I think I'm getting there. I can.
Which is why I gave it a 5-star.
Yeah. Well, that was a question I had for you, just rating wise. Are you like free with your 5 stars, or do you have like a rating system? How do you approach reviewing? Because I do it in a professional and non-professional capacity, like for the official blog and as a judge, and then just privately on my channel, and I approach those very differently. But I'm just curious for you, how do you go about rating books?
Well, I mean, I write reviews on my Goodreads, sadly not for profit. I mean, if I could do that for profit, well, I do reviews for my newspaper job, so I guess I do it for profit. But anyway, I'll admit I'm pretty tough with my 5 stars. I'm like, this book has to really, like, damn, like they really gotta,
Yeah.
But
have that special punch to them.
Yeah, but generally I'm more lenient than some of my other friends. I generally, but that's because I generally try to look for books that I would enjoy reading.
Yeah.
So like if a book sounds like generic crap, I don't read it because I'd rather talk about good books.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. I was just curious because everyone, approaches it in different ways. Like if I'm reviewing for Spiffo, even if I adored a book, I it might be a personal 5-star, but it might not be like this is cream of the crop and deserves to be the champion of the entire competition. So like there's two different ways to look at it. So
Yeah, no one's asked me about Spiff. I mean, I've started to kind of crawl into the Spiffbo business. I guess I've started getting into
hmm
indie fantasy or the indie
mm,
sphere because
hmm
a lot of people I've met are in that and are like, "There's some good stuff here," and I can
oh yeah.
confirm there are some good stuff. I actually just recently finished The Legend of Blackjack by
Mm,
A.R.
hmm
Witham, which I thought was pretty good. It was also a
Yeah,
bit of
yeah.
a
I haven't gotten into
nostalgic read for me because it reminded me a lot of the
that.
adventures I read growing up.
Yeah, I haven't read that one yet, but I have heard from a lot of people that book has a lot of charm.
It's a
It's a
good
very
one.
charming. Yeah.
There is some info dumping at the beginning of the book, but aside
Mm,
from that, it's
mm,
pretty good. So
mm, 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 mm. Yeah, the indie sphere has some great gems. I mean, some of them are up here: Gunmetal Gods, Legacy of the Bright Wash, some of my all-time favorites there, and they're indie. Um, but there's just so much
I
that I
know. Oh
think
my
it's hard
gosh.
to know where to start. And that's where I think, while Spiffo is definitely not the end all be all, and some books get good, really good books get cut in the first round, I do think it's a starting point. And you can go from, okay, these books have been read by so many eyes, and so many eyes like them, so I can start here.
Yeah, I mean,
I think,
I've had a mini nervous breakdown after realizing the whole world of indie books because I'm like, I have all these other books I want to read. Come on.
I've given up on my TBR. Like
No.
I'm never gonna read them all, so I just have to prioritize, little by little.
Yeah, like I read Way of Edan, and I'm actually hoping to read Return to Edan next month. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I really like the Way of Edan though, and I had Philip
Mm,
on my channel, so there you go.
hmm Yeah.
Because he's always he's very kind and generous person.
Yes. Those are the perfect words to describe him.
Though we
Extremely
had some
focused.
time screwy stuff because I
Mm,
messed up on the time, but
mm.
it was really good. I remember liking it a lot.
Yeah, it has like a classic feel, right? There's songs in it too, right? I believe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We've had a couple discussions. Been lucky enough to have a couple discussions with him, and he's always a proponent of the songs. So if someone like reads Lord of the Rings, he's like, "Don't skip the songs."
yeah. No. I did tell him for his peace of mind. I'm like, I did read the songs, so you're good.
Yes,
And he's like, thank you.
yes.
You're one of the chosen ones.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry if you
yeah.
can hear that. My dogs. It
Oh,
sounds like
that's fine.
I don't know if you guys can hear that.
There is definitely an excited puppy somewhere in the background, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
We love dogs here, so yeah.
So I thought I heard you speaking Japanese earlier. So like, do you have dogs?
No, no, but we love dogs. We just
Oh,
aren't allowed to have them where we currently live. I have them in the
oh,
States, but yes, if we did, they would definitely Japanese would be the language that they would know
oh,
for
okay.
sure. Yeah, I mean, my husband does speak English very well, but we're surrounded by Japanese, so
Well, yeah,
that's what we
yeah.
speak.
Be weird if you're like, hey there, I don't know a Japanese name. I'm sorry. How you doing today? And the guy's like, it's like question marks. Like
Right,
what?
right. Mhm. Yeah, we would love to get a dog though, for sure.
Yeah, no. My dog's name is Alexis. She probably sees someone walking.
Oh, outside you mean? I
Yes.
thought you meant okay. I thought you meant in the house.
Either my mom's home because she went out eating, or she sees somebody walking outside.
I see. Well, if you need to check, by all means, let's go
Yeah,
look.
I might edit that out. I'll be right back real quick. I'll
Yeah.
probably edit this part out.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. She was
No, that's
barking
fine.
at the backyard for some reason. I didn't see anything out there, so might be a
Maybe
squirrel.
a squirrel or something. Yeah, something like that. That's fine. Animals are gonna animal. So
Oh yeah, my cat, she doesn't care. She'll just bust into my office while I'm like recording videos or doing
Mm-mm.
conversations. I'm like, really? Like right now? Or we declutter, which I personally didn't really want, but my parents were like, we didn't want her scratching everything, so yeah, you'll just on the door. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like right now?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, we can't have dogs or cats in our apartment, but we wanted a pet because we both love having pets. So we have a snake actually. We have a ball python.
Okay.
Yeah. He's adorable and he loves to be held and handled. So you can see him on my
I had a
channel
friend. He had a iguana.
too. Mm.
Yeah, he had an iguana. It was kind of creepy. It would like stare. It would just stand still, like right there, and it would look at
Mm-mm.
me, and I was like, mm.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the intelligence level of iguanas. Maybe they're up there, but like bearded dragons, they'll respond to their name. They're very intelligent creatures. So I understand people who don't like reptiles so much. I draw the line when there's more than four legs. I don't, absolutely not. Maybe that's why I like snakes because there's no legs to speak of. But our snake is not smart. He would definitely die if he was in the wild, but he's cute, so it makes up for it.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we were kind of brainstorming like what can we have if we can't have anything that makes noise and it has to be in a cage or whatever. And we were like, well, just so happened that he also likes ball pythons. So his name is Pretzel.
Aw, pretzel.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I have another friend who really likes snakes. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he's also a big Harry Potter fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan as well. That was the first series I think I read. I mean, I started when I was too young to read. So my dad read them to me. And then even when I was old enough to read, we continued the tradition. So we read them all together for the first time. So those books just have a very core memory for me. Always have, always will. So I was just part of that generation, waiting
Yeah,
for book releases.
I grew up during the movies, though I didn't watch them or I didn't like consume Harry Potter until I was
Mm.
in middle school. And I'm like, "Oh
Hmm.
man, why did I miss this? Oh, this is
Yeah.
great."
Yeah. It was just such a cultural movement that it's kind of like Game of Thrones was a cultural movement just for the younger generation, right? I hope people that were, the audience for the first Harry Potter book were not watching Game of Thrones, but it was still had the same kind of like juggernaut effect. So I think it was a very unique time when the books were coming out. So I just happened to grow up during that time. So yeah, very much that's a formative series for me, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'll admit I like cats a lot. So I do love my dog though, even
Hmm.
if she's wailing. Hey, when she does that, it always sounds like she's like getting murdered or something. It's like, geez.
She all right? You need to check on her again? That's totally fine.
No, it's okay. I'm just, I checked and I didn't see anything, so I'm
Okay.
writing it up to a squirrel.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Famous last words, but um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything on your radar that you want to pick up soon besides that the crime fiction book that you showed? Is there anything else
Oh man.
kind of you're thinking of reading
I'm
next?
hoping to read the sequel to Black Leopard Red Wolf soon,
Mm,
in which Spider
mm,
King.
mm.
Because I really enjoyed that book a lot, and some other fantasy I'm hoping to read. Uh,
Well, it doesn't have to be fantasy. Like for me,
oh,
I'm going to read this science fiction, which is On the Origin of Species and Other Stories by Bo Young Kim. So this is a translated Korean collection of short science fiction.
oh,
And yeah, so I'm excited to get to this one. I've been in the mood for short stories recently. I've been eating them up. So I'm very excited to get to this one. So it doesn't have to be fantasy. I'm just curious,
Oh
what
well,
else you.
yeah, like I said, Power of the Dog. I'm hoping to read.
Mm-hmm.
Another crime book I'm hoping to read is The Black Dahlia, because
Mm,
I like James Elroy, and I haven't actually read that book yet. It
mm,
was his first like big like L.A. book, so there you
mm,
go.
mm, mm.
Some other books I hope to read over the summer. Lonesome Dove, going back to westerns, because that's
Even as someone who knows nothing about westerns, I know that name.
um I, I I don't know if you've had this experience, but like it's like everybody, their sisters, their moms, grandmas are like, read this book, Britton, as soon as
Yeah.
possible. And I'm like,
Mm.
you know what? Fine. I got it for Christmas. I'm gonna do it. But I have to finish this other chunker I'm reading first, because Lonesome Dove is another chunky
Yeah.
boy.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that.
Chunky boy.
Oh no. Well, it's like I say, oh no. I love chunky boys. I'm currently reading Of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill, which is 827 pages or something like that. It's an ebook, so it doesn't feel, chunky because I'm reading it via ebook. But I do like a chunker. But you just have to be in the mood, to take those on.
Oh, I had to hype myself up for a few years before I started Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, so I know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not
it's
afraid of them by any means. A lot of my favorite stories are huge. Like the
no,
Dandelion Dynasty I mentioned earlier are huge.
no, they just
But
take a lot of time.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, and I find that I tend to be reading something simultaneously. Like when I'm reading a big book like that, I'll take my time with it and then read smaller things
Yeah,
in between.
there's a couple other chunkers that, but yeah, it's also I'm hoping to read Gormenghast, or Tide Has Grown at least, from Gormenghast, because that's one I've
Mm,
heard about for a long time.
mm,
I got
mm,
the
mm.
omnibus version, so basically, let me look here. I've used this that, so I'm gonna read that. I was
Okay.
I was gonna start this summer, but then other stuff got in the way, and I'm like, I'll just September. You're right there. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think just like picking out a time when you're going to start something like that is really important. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is the moment where I'm gonna pick this one up. Behind me, it's not a chonker, but the Helm of Midnight here. I tried. I ended up really enjoying that book. I gave it 4 stars. It was great. It was a great genre blend of things. Very dark, but I started it and then soft DNF'd it for like no reason. I just kind of stopped reading it, and there was no real reason why that was the case. And I put it on so many TBRs, and it became like a meme on my channel because I would put it on the TBR and not read it. So it would be on the TBR, and then the wrap up, I'd be like, y'all don't even need to know I didn't get to that. And that happened for like a year, almost maybe over a year. And I finally read it, and it was just like a party over on my channel. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, you read it!" I'm like, I did. Aren't you so proud of me?
Yeah, no. Oh god, what's another book I'm hoping to read soon? I'm hoping to read Deathless in December.
What's that? I've never heard of that.
It is a book by Catherine, or no, can't I have it over here? Where's it at? I can't find it at the moment. It's by a lady
Hmm.
named Kathleen. I think it's Kathleen Verante.
Okay.
I probably butchered that. I apologize. Or Volante. Someone can
Mm.
correct me down below in the comments section if I got it wrong. But it's basically based on Slavic folklore, and it's based on
Okay.
World War II, the
Mm.
Russian part, which is a particularly brutal chapter of that particular conflict. um, yeah, I've been wanting to read. That's another one, kind of like that book you mentioned, where I was like, I was gonna read it, put it off. I'm like, this year, I'm gonna do it. So,
Yeah. And there doesn't seem to really be a rhyme or reason to what book ends up being that book. Like, there's nothing wrong with The Helm of Midnight. I just didn't get to it. So I don't know if you feel the same way about yours, but it's just, I don't
oh
know.
no, I kept like losing track of the time, and I just didn't
Mm,
have enough time to get to it.
mm, mm, mm.
Um, there's some horror books I want to get to this year, because in October I really go nuts with the horror. Like, I'll read horror during the year. Like
Mm-hmm.
I read the T Kingfisher you were talking about. I read her two little novellas.
Mm.
God, what's its name? I'm thinking of What Moves the Dead, which I thought was pretty
Ah,
good.
and then there's a sequel to that,
And
right?
yeah, and What Feasts at Night, which was
Mm-hmm.
fine, more of a ghost story. But
I see.
it's I like the first one more. I'll put it that way. The second one's pretty good, but I was like,
Mm.
I'm also a big Edgar Allan Poe fan, so it's
The first
probably
one's
biased
based
there.
off of Fall of House of Usher, right? The
It
first one
is,
she did, What Moves the
yes,
Dead. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I liked it. They're quick
I, I
reads.
could see um, not so much. You said the second one, not so much. What'd you say?
No, the second one was fine, but it was like a yeah, I was like okay, yeah, it's pretty good.
Mm-mm.
I like these characters, but like the story wasn't as like you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can see Kingfisher's writing voice really lending itself to horror, though, because even Nettle and Bone, she did such a good job of balancing like the whimsical side of fairy tales, but giving it this dark underbelly that gave it a lot of weight. Um, so I could definitely see her voice lending itself to horror pretty well.
Yeah, no, she's good. There's a lot of really great like creepy moments in What Moves the Dead particularly that I
Mm-mm.
really liked.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
very fungal. So yeah, I was about.
Fungal. That seems to be a vibe recently. Lots of fungi. Mexican Gothic as well.
I haven't
Fungal
read that.
vibes.
I've heard that's good. I've heard that's good. Like,
I
it's.
haven't read it either, but the one thing I know about it is they're mushrooms. So
Oh man, we should get Adrian in on that. He would love it.
he's probably already read it. Wouldn't be surprised. Mhm.
No, it's a good book though. I really like I really like how she plays with that story and modernizes it without
Mm.
because I really don't like in historical stories when they like try to like implement modern values. Like, look, we get
Mm-mm-mm.
there was like racism and stuff back in the day. You don't have to moralize about it on your pages.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, a book that actually did this really well was that didn't like moralize about it, but it portrayed it portrayed a certain horrible thing honestly without going like moralizing about it. And
Mhm.
Kindred, I read it with a friend of
Yeah.
mine. Blew me away. I love that book. It's probably my
Yeah.
favorite book I've read this year so far. Anyway.
I haven't read any Butler, but I've heard some incredible stuff about it. And I do think that there's a difference from being in conversation with histories, with things that have been said in the past or stories from the past, rather than trying to erase what they were. Or, like you said, more, get on a soapbox. There's a difference between being in conversation with and then soapboxing to people. So I do
Yeah,
think that it's
exactly.
a line that some people don't do well.
Yeah, I mean, there's another book I want to try called The Underground Railroad by
Mm.
Colson. God, what's this last? It's like Whitewood or something. I wanted to try.
Hmm.
That's another one I've put off for a few years. I've wanted to really read, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Because again, the
Mm-mm.
time just keeps getting away.
Yeah, that's something, we mentioned P. Jelly Clark earlier. Clark writes a lot of fantasy, but all of his books are all genre blends. And so he also wrote Ring Shout, and he's also part of like a horror anthology. So he writes a lot of horror. And he's like, this is a really interesting conversation we have with him, which is we all love tentacles. We all love that cosmic horror. But Lovecraft was just a shit human. Like, there is no way around that. So he's
I'd
like,
go a step further. I don't even think he was that great of a writer, but I won't go there.
ooh, you are just shots fired
Yeah, I
everywhere.
know. I got my guns out. I'm like, bam, bam, bam. Yeah, no.
But he was just saying that, because he loves that type of horror, he's always like in conversation with who's seen as the godfather of that horror. So it's just, you know, it's something that I think a lot of modern
It's
writers have.
weird with Lovecraft. There's some of his stories. I'm like, yeah, this is okay. Like I can handle this, but like like it sucks that his like world and like creatures and like weird monsters are cool. Like I
Yeah,
like the mythos. It's just
right.
I don't think he's that good of a writer. And
That's
also,
that's a fair
like
criticism.
like if to be honest with you, I think his like correspondence that he did is far more interesting than like his actual fiction
Mm,
writing, because like
mm,
the dude was a legit like scholar of the horror
mm,
genre. I mean, if he
mm.
hadn't shut himself away and wrote horror stories, I think he'd have been a good academic. He really could have been.
I can't say I've read any of his correspondence or anything like that. So it's a really cool angle. I've never heard that before. That'd be something I'd be interested in looking at. I like finding out the lore, behind the.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd for that. I mean, I made a video called "Is Fantasy in an Identity Crisis?" Because I'm just a big nerd for like the history and just
Mm,
genres and like the authors conversating with each other. Because I've said this
hmm.
before, but I like to view not just fantasy but just literature in general as like people talking to each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, isn't there one of the things I do know is Hawthorne from the Scarlet Letter and Melville, right? From
They were friends, if I
Moby
remember
Dick.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. So
I
you
don't
can
mean it
see.
that literally, but yes,
Oh, okay.
there's yeah, that I mean like there's like Tolkien's Lord of the
Hmm.
Rings, and then
Yeah.
there's Michael Moorcock, who
Hmm.
was kind of like, I don't think that's the hot crop of fantasy, and he writes like epic poo and I
Right.
mean like that, But
I see. I
there,
see.
but there are certain like the guy who wrote Conan, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft knew each other, or well, they wrote to
Mm,
each other.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Again, I'm a big nerd about that stuff, so I
Yeah.
could I
Well,
could
we
go
did.
off.
Well, you don't have to go off, but I did have a really interesting discussion about that kind of thing of people having a conversation with each other through their stories that they choose to write with Tad Williams, because we talked about Lord of the Rings, because Tad said um, it was a monumental series for me and it was my biggest inspiration, but it also inspired me in what I did not want to do in my stories.
Mm.
So he's like, my works are almost in conversation with Lord of the Rings. So there's a
Sure.
context.
I mean, yeah. Ted Williams is actually, alas, is not one of the fantasy authors I've read, but I've watched interviews with him, and he seems like a really interesting guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and definitely, like, if I ever had the chance, I would love to talk to him,
Yeah, yeah.
because
He has a plethora of life experience and he's not afraid to share it.
no, but like it's a similar thing. I think Game of Thrones, at least the books anyway. Well, the show to an extent. I won't go too much into the show, but I feel the books are very similarly like in conversation with Lord of the Rings, or the
Mm-mm-mm.
fantasy that came before it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the themes that he decides to flip on their heads makes a lot of sense. Makes a
Oh
lot of
man,
sense.
he flipped so many. He killed Sean Bean, and he killed Sean
Well,
Bean
Sean Bean
again.
always happens. Okay, there's like this trend of, I don't know how online you are, like how on YouTube you are, but I watch some reaction channels. There's a couple that I follow, and there's like a trend where the younger generation is now reacting to the Lord of the Rings trilogy for like the first time, and it's like blowing up in the reaction world, and everyone's like, is that Ned Stark? When John Bean comes on the screen, I'm like, that is Ned. Yes, it is. Before he was Ned. That is him. Yes. And then I guess maybe
He
some of
died
them
in
don't know
James Bond.
the
He died in
yeah,
he
exactly.
died in Lord of the Rings, and Game of
Always dies.
Thrones,
Yep. And that's
and
why when
other
people
things I can't think
are
of.
watching it, they're like, oh no, like that, maybe they don't know the meme, but the initial reaction is like, oh, so his character is gonna die, right? That's how that works.
Yeah, no, it's funny how that works. It's
He's good while he's on screen, he nails it.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, apparently in
Maybe that's
Sharp he
why his
doesn't die. So
in what? I'm sorry.
I said apparently in Sharp he doesn't die.
Oh, didn't even
So
know that movie existed. So
yeah, oh
I
yeah,
told you I'm bad at
you're not
TV.
much of a cinephile. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, well, it's not that I don't like movies. It's that I'm just
You don't
crap
watch them.
at
I hear you.
watching things. Like I just, even if I find a series that I love, I will binge watch the first season in a couple days and then forget it exists and not continue it for literally no reason. So I'm just really bad at watching
No, I'm the
things.
same way. I got a bunch of streaming services now, and it's like when you get a wealth of choice, you just
Yeah.
get lazy. Yeah. That's sad to say, but it's true.
Yep, yep. Yep, paralyzed by choice. I
I
feel that way
know.
sometimes with my TBR. When I finish a book, I'm like, now what? I have moments where I feel that way.
Yeah, I had a big
Um,
case of that in like April because I'm like, oh man, I didn't really have a lot of books I was planning to read this month. What am I gonna read? And I
yeah,
just picked up some books and read them, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this.
yeah.
Read this crime
There's a
book.
reason I liked doing this, right?
Yeah, no, I also started a book, and I did. It wasn't a DNF, but it was a. I'll get back to you later.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was
We call those a soft DNF over here.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah,
I guess get back to later doesn't have a nice ring to it
exactly.
as
Everything needs an
DNF.
acronym. Don't you know this?
Darn internet.
Yeah. Twitter word count. Damn it.
I would have to pay to get like more words. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like I don't want.
It's getting none of my money. Twitter is getting none of my money. I
Dang
have
it, Elon.
background. Huh?
I said, dang it, Elon. You
Yeah,
jerk.
exactly. I've got some backup platforms now, so if it does one day implode, I'll miss some of the DMs that I have, of course. But those DMs and those more personal conversations are why I do it mostly now. So,
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just use Twitter to just filibuster about things. Just be like, either it's me popping off about like random stuff that like irritates me, or
mm,
it's me talking with other people, or just random observations that I've
hmm
had in life.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good place for
I
that.
love Twitter actually.
Well, I think that's what Twitter was supposed to be for. Just like, high thoughts at like 3 a.m. Like that's what Twitter was for. It lost the plot.
Yeah, I know. I was talking to Adrian, like I said the other day, and I'm like, I hope my parents aren't listening to this, but I've actually wanted to try hallucinogens, and he's like,
Mm.
oh yeah, and he's like, but yeah, I'm always nervous that I'm gonna have like a Sid Barrett situation where I just like where I go crazy because I take too much of it. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe don't like do it every day, and that probably won't happen. I'm like, okay, that all right, I can live with that.
Well, Adrian knows way more than I do, but allegedly, not saying I've ever done anything in my own life. But doing something like that for the first time with someone who knows what they're doing is what I would recommend. Because if you don't know what you're
Fair
doing,
enough. Yeah.
like find a buddy that knows what they're doing and be like, hey, so what do we do here? Right? Allegedly, not, not
All right,
promoting.
I won't. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I was talking to him about that. I'm like, like, cause I'm like, I'm not really like I've never been. I don't want to do drugs for one,
Yeah.
and like I'm not much of a drinker either. Like I do
Mm-hmm.
drink alcohol, but like just like on like like hard lemonade or like on like
Mm-hmm.
special occasions or when I'm out with my friends.
That's very healthy.
But
There's nothing wrong.
like hallucinogens though, I'm like I might try. That's like the only one I'm like okay, I can I'd like to try that sometime.
Mm-mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I mean, you got a whole life to be able to figure out when that's going to happen. I'm sure there's a way.
Yeah, I'll be like
Uh,
40 and I'll have a kid and I'll be like, all right, I'll just do it now. Kid's asleep, it'll be fine.
get a
Probably.
babysitter. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't have to be that long.
Like I said, everyone has their own pace. So, but Japan is very strict with that kind of stuff. So they don't play.
It's probably why they
Double
have
lettuce
anime.
also, absolutely not. Jail time.
Have you seen any of the anime or manga? They I don't know what drugs they do out there in Japan, but like we need to get some of that because just some of that unhinged creativity is kind of inspiring.
Yeah, unhinged creativity is a good way
Or
to
maybe
word
people
it.
are just naturally that weird in Japan. Like, do you have any insight into that? Because you're from Japan.
I think, I mean, there's always going to be outliers where even Japanese people are like, dude, but like one that comes to mind for me would be Evangelion. I finally watched that. I don't know if you've
I have
seen
not
that, but
watched it, but I know of it.
yeah, so it's very famous. So that's why I mentioned that as like it's not a fringe one, right? But the end is it's so fucking weird. Like so I think
Did you
that
watch it with your husband? Or...
I actually buddy watched it with a friend who also happens to live here, but he's from the West. So
Oh.
he loves it. And he was like, let's watch it together. And there were some parts of it that I really liked. But then after the end, I'm like concerned. I'm like, are you okay? You love this. Are you okay? but a lot of people love it. But I do think that this country is, well, of course, from a Western lens, the storytelling style is different.
Well,
so
yeah.
even if you read translated Japanese literature, just talking about the novel form, it doesn't have like a beginning, a middle, and an end almost ever. So it can make you feel real like you're lost in limbo. So that's something that like Murakami, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's one of the most famous.
He's one of those I've wanted to read him for a very long time. I just haven't
Yeah,
been able to.
his books are fucking weird. Like I read IQ84, talk about chonker. It's huge. Couldn't tell you what happened in that whole book. I couldn't tell you.
I heard he
I read
went
the whole
like
book.
straight old school. Like he made it a serialized novel. Apparently, I heard.
I mean, I guess I didn't pick up on it. Maybe I read it when I was too young or wasn't a good enough reader yet. Hey, AP. But basically what I'm trying to say is that type of storytelling that is kind of odd and liminal and kind of lives in that space is not strange here. So some of the stuff that you would see in manga or anime, I think is kind of in that vein. There's always, like I said, going to be stuff that's real out there. But the whole like yelling, and like how loud
that's
it
the
was.
thing. Like I can't do with anime. I mean, I do like Dragon Ball Z, but like aside from that, like it's really hard to cope
You
with all the
can't say
yelling.
you don't like yelling and watch Dragon Ball Z. That's all they do.
Okay, I like some yelling. Okay, I like some yelling.
Yelling is just like, I think that's part of the genre in the way that like other tropes are part of other genres. I've always wondered if it's kind of a reflection on society here where people are so quiet, like no one would ever dare to do that in public ever. So maybe it's like wish fulfillment.
Maybe. I don't know. No, yeah, I mean, like some of the like I generally like the more like grounded anime and manga. Like I read like Monster from Naoki Urasawa.
Fantastic.
Oh
so
man, isn't it? It's so good. It's I'm that's another one. I'm like, man, why didn't I read that earlier? And then I read Pluto, which is also really good. But I like Monster more.
I haven't read that one. But,
or if did you watch the anime?
No, I haven't. Again, bad at watching stuff. Anime is part of that. So, but Monster, I read the manga for Monster.
I was about
to
say.
I read that the first time when I was too young to appreciate it. I was like, these pictures aren't pretty. Like when I was young, and now I'm rereading it now, and I've reread.
I actually like the art of Naoki Urasawa a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's grown on me for sure. I think I've probably read it when I was in my main manga phase, would have been early, like middle school. So I was into more like Inuyasha and like Sailor Moon and like Fruits Basket.
Then again, I also read Berserk, and that's all. That is very stylized as well. But like again, I don't know. I like the detail in that series. I guess I don't know. there's some anime stuff in there, but like it's I like it. But it was so like it was so emotionally damaging. I had to put it down. I was like, dude, I can't.
Yeah, I haven't read Berserk, but I do know. My husband's read almost all the main mangas out there because he's had his whole life to do so, right? So, he said that I would like it. He's like, it's just dark. Just get ready for it. But I haven't read it yet. But I know it's popular.
Yeah, I mean, I won't spoil, but there's. I mean, it makes Game of Thrones look tame.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say. That's all I gotta say. There's even cosmic horror elements in that, so you might take to it.
Yeah, I might in the end.
Yeah, no, it's something else. Yeah. But no, I don't read a lot of manga. I don't know. It's just like, well, for one, I don't know where to start because like again, it's like it's massive, but also what I have read, like there's a lot of like over the topness, and I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think the over the topness does just kind of come with the genre, and I can understand why it's off putting for some people. For sure. Of course, there's like manga and anime for all things. Like there's like cooking manga. There's manga about reptiles, like learning how to take care of reptiles. Like there's stuff for literally. There's
Like
just the
sports
stuff that doesn't
manga.
get
I've read some
translated.
sports manga.
You know?
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So there's stuff for everyone, I think, out there. But the bigger ones, yeah, it's just the over the topness is just part of it.
So yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
I like more like grounded anime, like Cowboy
Mhm.
Bebop is my favorite anime, but that's just like that series just feels made for me. So I'm like,
Mm,
I
mm,
love it.
mm, mm.
And all
Yeah.
my friends are like, oh, Samurai Champloo's so much better. I'm like, maybe it is, but you're not changing my mind on
You're gonna
Cowboy
pry
Bebop.
this out of my cold dead fingers, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Fruits Basket. It's so I read a lot of shoujo growing up, and it's such a good series. Like I know people are saying there's better ones out there. Mm-mm. You'll pry Fruits Basket from my cold dead fingers. Love it. I love it so much.
That's the one.
Not the
That's the
first
hill you're
anime.
dying on. I hear you. I hear you.
Oh yes, not the first anime. That's absolute trash. But they did a remake that kind of did the manga justice. So
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. That was Monster for me. I'm like, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in. And then like, there's like some really great like, mm, just
mhm,
great
mhm,
emotional
mhm.
moments.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's
think
another
the
one. Like, I don't know how I would review that. I might need to get like a panel of people and discuss it.
monster.
Yeah.
How you review it? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even in the first volume, again, we're staying away from spoilers or anything in this,
Uh
but
huh.
like in the first volume, that's the one I recently reread, right? There's this moral dilemma that he hits you with right away, and
Mm
you have to decide how you feel about that moral dilemma because he's not going to tell you how to feel about
hmm. Mm
it.
hmm.
And that's something else that Japanese literature often does is they'll just like put something out there and then there's no opinions, there's no characters commenting on this thing that just happened. You as a reader just have to make up your mind how you feel about it. And it can be weird to have something just kind of plopped in front of you and be like, get figure it out. And the author's like, I'm not going to tell you. And I feel like Monster started out that way as well. So
Oh,
there's a lot of stuff for discussion.
like when I imagine Monster, he just keeps cranking up the ante. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I read
Mm-hmm.
Pluto, which is much shorter, but it's also very
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Um,
I'll take that recommendation to heart. Add it to the
um,
TBR.
and 20th Century Boys, I haven't dared touch yet because, well, for one, I haven't felt the itch for it yet, and
Mm-mm.
also after Pluto, I was kind of Urasawa out, so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, these two are great. I'm just gonna chill for a
Yeah.
bit. There's other comics and manga I'd like to read.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, just like any book, you don't want to read something when you're not in the mood for it and then not do it justice. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would also say it depends on when you pick something up. Like I have a very, very soft spot for Inuyasha because I watched that when I was young. But if I were to watch it now, I don't think it would hit the way that it did. Right? I think I watched it at the right time, and I think that's a big part of any kind of media. But I think it's a big part of manga too. So some of the ones that like someone might hype up and be like, "Oh, you have to read it." It just might not be the right time in your life for you to be reading that.
Maybe. But I mean, Monster was my favorite comic of 2022. So I mean,
Mm,
I
mm,
loved it.
mm, mm.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's good
yes,
writing.
he's not doing the cliche anime stuff. I mean, there's some. I mean, I don't know. I guess there is some. I mean, I watched Daniel Green the other day talk about
Hmm.
Monster. Or this was a few months back, or maybe even longer than that. But I remember he was going like, "There's some stuff in here that's like really weird," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right." I guess Urasawa just makes it work for some reason. I don't know why. I mean,
He could just be an author that makes it work for you. That's great that you found one.
um,
Um,
Berserk similarly. I remember starting it out. I was like, okay, and that's why I always tell people maybe start with the Golden Age arc because that's kind of where the story really starts. It's the first one is
mm,
definitely the author kind of figuring out what tone he's going for, at least in my
mm-hmm,
opinion.
mm-mm-mm. That
Um,
makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I always tell people, like, if you read the Black Swordman arc first, which is like the first little mini arc, you
Mm.
might cringe because there's like some grimdark edgelord stuff in there, but like
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm like, okay, just go to the golden arc and then go back to that and then just read the rest of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
that's why I tell people now. I stopped after one of the arcs. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I gotta put this down.
Yeah. For your own mental health, right? Take a breather.
Emotional damage was too much to handle.
Emotional damage, right?
No, but yeah, that's a good one. And some people might go like, Britton, that's over the top too. And you know what? Fine. I don't know. Berserk does it for me for some reason.
Well, I think what you're doing is you're just finding authors that do the over the top thing in the way you like.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You know?
I mean, that's why we read comics. Comics, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff that you can't do anywhere else, you know?
Yep.
You think that Monster could have made it as a novel? I don't think so.
Mm-mm. No, I think it's in the right medium, you know? For sure. For sure.
Or, you know, like a TV show. Well, maybe it could have. Well, it did turn into an anime. And the anime is actually pretty good. So it's very close.
Oh, really?
It's very
Sometimes
close.
they drop the ball. Sometimes not, but...
Oh, it's very
That's
close.
Good. Well, that was smart then. They did the right thing.
Which is kind of funny. When I see sometimes the manga adaptations, they're basically just like the manga on screen, which is good. It means they're doing their job.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by the One Piece reception. The
I've been hesitant to try One Piece, but a lot of people like it. Philip likes it. He's made a meme out of it. How he likes it.
Yeah, I mean, my husband is very. He has a hot take where he's like, I don't like One Piece. He's like, I think it's crap compared to other stuff.
He's like an aficionado of anime.
No, he's like, nah. So I have that voice in my ear. I haven't started it yet, but it's like 120 books, I think.
Yeah, I told a friend of mine, I'm like, this series is so old, it could be in college. And he's like, and he went a step further. He's like, oh man, screw that. It'd be out of college and having kids by now.
Yeah,
having little One Pieces. I'm like,
having little One Pieces. That's cute.
No, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like that's the thing with anime, and even like with American comics too. It's like, man, they're really long.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about, it being the right time to take on something. I think that's another example of that. I
mean, with Monster, like it's like 100-something issues, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, it's about as long as like a regular like American comic run. So like I could probably do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like it was so engaging though. It was like, I gotta bite all
I couldn't put it down when I reread the first one because I
like,
remember
thinking it takes a minute to get going. Now some people might chafe at that, but it does take a minute to get going. But once it does, like, oh, I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, like I said, when I read it for the first time, I was too young, so my memory of it was like mid. It's mid, and then I read the first volume again recently. I was like, what? Fast Taylor? I could not put it down for the life of me. So I agree. It's very addictive.
Yeah, which is like what that type of story should do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I mean, I always try to get people to pitch me stuff. When I do these type of shows, I know you like Jade City and the Jade books, and I'm actually like I actually would like to try that at some point because it is a trilogy, and I generally try to stick with smaller series when I read. So like why should your humble podcaster YouTuber should read the Jade books?
Well, I think you should pick them up when you're in the mood for something that becomes more intricate than you imagine it'll be in the beginning. So it is an urban fantasy, but it's we follow the perspective of a crime family, essentially. They are the top of their gang, for lack of a better word. That's probably the best analog. And there's a rival gang. And the first book is small in scope. So why I think you should pick that up is because it will grip you from the beginning. Like we're talking like street fights, like very visceral catches you from the beginning, gang war kind of feeling. And then the second book and the third book, respectively, get broader in scope and more intricate and bring in other influences. And so it becomes a discussion not just of physical hard power, but also soft power and political.
I've heard like jade is like a drug or something.
Yes. So jade plays into all of these power structures because it's essentially a drug that imbues the wearer with basically any power you want, super strength, super speed, like all of that. But only certain people can wear it without consequences. And you have to train to be able to do that. So it gives you something called the itches if you're not trained correctly or you use too much of it,
So
where
like
you basically scratch your skin off and then die.
So like withdrawal.
Yeah, withdrawal. That's fatal, and it's an awful experience. And so, but because it provides this power, it's a commodity in the world. So it can be bought, it can be sold, it can be traded, and the people that have it and can wear it also hold that power. So it is such a good exploration of soft power, political power structures. And then for me, something that I love as well is the exploration of family, because at the core of this, it's a family saga. So
I do like family sagas.
yes, it's a family saga where the characters, oh God, you really hate them sometimes, but it matches their character. You're like, there's one
how
character
else would it work?
Well, there's some people who sometimes a character will do something awful, and you're like, why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense for you. But everything that these characters do that is awful makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think the final thing I would say is if you like character work that is morally gray in the sense that if you were on another side of the issue, if you had a slightly different perspective, these people might be the villains. But because you have it from their perspective, you're rooting for them, right? So I think that detailed character work is one of the things that Fonda Lee doesn't have, is very peerless in many ways and with that type of character work.
Yeah, I've heard it be compared to The Godfather a lot, which interests me because, again, I won't go too much in the movie talk, but it's one of my favorite films. So
yes, the Godfather comparisons from what I've only seen the first film.
Oh, so you've seen the best one.
Yeah. So those comparisons are apt, I believe. They're apt. So I would just say that I would pick it up at a time when you would be interested in reading something intricate. Because
I might actually wait till next year because I have a bunch of other fantasies I'm hoping to start this year.
Oh. Yeah. It'll be there when you're ready, but I think she's peerless in her character work. And there's a part in the first and the second book, both of those, where I literally screamed out loud. And the first one I was in public. No, right? So
Everyone
she's not
just
afraid.
Looked at you like, what is she doing?
Yeah. I was like, I'm sorry, apologies, just the crazy foreigner, screaming over here. But, she is just, yeah, she's not afraid to put her characters through it, for sure. So that would be my pitch.
All right, yeah, that sounds great.
It is, and she's also a black belt, so her fighting scenes are very visceral. Like you can tell that she knows what to do in real life, actually. So when people fight each other, they fight for real.
Well, that's interesting. I look forward to reading that then. Whenever, maybe 2025. We'll put it on the 2025.
That's actually not that far away in the grand scheme of things. When you think about TBRs 1 year from now, manageable.
I know, but I remember last year, I'm like, I'm going to just save that for next year. And people are like, what? Already? Like, dude, we're not even, like, close to that yet. I'm like, hey, it goes by, man.
Yeah.
Don't even question.
Oh. We're almost halfway through the year. It's just, when?
Yeah, no, it's just, that makes sense. Yeah. No, it's bad. Or not bad. What am I talking about? But yes, it's not very far away. Mm-hmm. I also can't believe we're already at the middle of the year.
I know, it's about to be June. It's wild. Wild. All the things that I said I would do in the second half of the year on my channel, I have to do now. How dare? How dare I have to
Like, look, I was
do what I
already
said I would
feeling
do?
angsty about getting older. All right, I'm 23. I'm already angsting about getting older. Okay, like,
No.
come on,
Don't
come
be.
on.
Don't be. You have your life ahead of you. I hadn't even moved to Japan officially like for these 8 years yet. Like at your age. So, I'm 32. So,
Oh, okay, okay,
yeah.
okay. Wow, that's
So,
funny because I'm 23. You're 32. That's
look at that, the flip.
the flip. Yeah, that's funny.
Now
Yeah,
you've got all the time in the world,
I
Britton.
think it made Tori cry actually.
What?
No, Jade. Jade did, not me getting older.
I see. Jade, the Green Bone Saga, you mean?
The Green Bone Saga. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
she messaged me after Jade Legacy, and she was like, "I am an emotional wreck." She's like, "Don't even talk to me right now." I was like, I know, I know. I'm sorry, but also welcome to the club. We all need to send Fonda Lee our therapy bills. She owes us that much.
Yeah, no, it's a yeah, yeah. I've seen it. I think she actually interviewed Fonda Lee not too long ago, didn't she?
She did after she finished the series. Yep, yep, yeah. Fonda's great at being open to being on online platforms. You know, some authors are a little bit harder to engage with or connect with, but she's very, very gracious in that realm. So,
Yeah, like I said, my friend Josh Pantelresco talked to her. So yeah,
mm-hmm,
back when he
mm-hmm.
started his podcast, Just Josh, and I've been on a few
Yeah.
times. No, but yeah, that's a series people tell me about. I'm like, I'm gonna try it. Maybe 2020. It'll be on the 2025. I'm gonna freaking read this as soon as possible.
Well, I'll be watching. I'll be watching for those reviews. Even if you disagree, that's okay. You're allowed to be wrong. I'll accept it. But you know, I'll definitely be watching for
Oh
that.
yeah,
I
didn't.
love when other people read it. So
Oh yeah, didn't Jimmy also read them?
yeah, it was actually part of group discussions with him, Philip, and Bookborn. So Philip and Jimmy were reading it for the first time, and Bookborn and I were on a reread. And we haven't done our discussion for Jade Legacy yet because kind of life happened for all of us. But that should be over on Bookborn's channel before long. We're hoping to do that soon. So
It's fair, you know. It's it's so hard getting everyone together when you do
yeah, I don't think
stuff.
people realize how much goes on behind the scenes, especially when you're dealing with different time zones. You know, so for page doing, you know, I'm in Japan and PL is in Canada. So already that's opposite time zones for the hosts. And then we got to figure out something that works
Yeah,
otherwise. So,
I talked to PL not too long ago. Another
hmm
indie author I talked to because
yeah, he's such a dear friend of mine.
he's a good guy. I enjoyed talking to him. It was kind of funny because I'm from Oklahoma, right? And our
Yeah.
football team's Oklahoma Sooners. I'm a fan.
Mm.
And he was telling me how like he likes the Oklahoma Sooners. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that about him.
yeah. I'm like, really? That's a. And it's
What a
kind.
strange connection.
I
I
know,
wonder
I know.
why.
I'm like, dude, you're in Canada. He's like, I know.
It feels like he just kind of rolled a dice and picked the team that it landed on. Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's one of yeah, no, I do want to try his series too, because oh man.
hmm Yeah, it's good. It's right behind me here. Mirroring. You'd think I would get that by now. um, yeah, it's good. It's very. I always say that he uses SAT words. Like I can't read his books quickly. Like
Oh
his prose is in a good way. It uses SAT words and it's elevated prose. So I take my time when I read his books. But it's talk about plot twisty and politics.
yeah,
Woo, that's stabbing.
we were talking about prose on our conversation the other day because that's something I used to not pay attention to as much, and now I pay attention to it more as I grow older.
I feel like it's something where I
As I
don't
become a
notice.
man, I should say. I guess it's not getting older.
As you get some hair on your chest, you know, prose
Yeah.
is getting important. I would say it's something I don't really notice the lack of. Like if it's just, like Brandon Sanderson or whatever, if it's that style writing, it doesn't bother me if it's not there, but I notice when it is. So it's kind of like a win-win for me. So
It's probably because you've read for a while, and I don't know. I've noticed that people just have people have like natural, just like something's wrong there.
mm-hmm.
It's like
You
that
mean
with
with
reading. You can't articulate. It's like survival instinct or something.
I see. Yeah, an instinctual.
Yeah, like you'll read
Mhm.
something, and be like, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was recently a book that I read that I was thoroughly enjoying until it became too long, which was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. It has purple prose, and the purple prose matches the story. I think it was the correct choice, but that bitch was way too long. They needed to cut it in half, because by the second half of the book, I was like, I get the metaphors, I get it. But in the beginning, I was taking so much joy from those things. So it was just an example of like, this should not have been as long as it was. But it's not that the prose was bad. It was just, but well, in the latter half, it felt like she was trying to make a beautiful sentence. Whereas in the beginning of it, it felt like a beautiful sentence existed, right?
Mm.
So by the end, I was like, I don't really want to see your effort. Like, it needs to feel effortless,
Oh yeah.
So,
Speaking of that, another book I would like to read before the end of this year. I'm hoping to read it in
mhm.
November for Veterans Day. The Things They Carried. I've wanted to read that book for a long time,
The
and
things they
I
carry. Yeah.
haven't.
I haven't either. I know it. I know of it, but no, I
I did
haven't.
not read it. Actually, no. I read a story from it when I was in middle school because I was one of those weird kids who liked to kind of course through the books that they
Mm,
gave us, like those textbooks. And there
mm,
was a
mm, mm.
story in there. I don't really remember it. I just remember like parts of it. But I'd like to read the whole thing at some point. So I'm like, this year
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna do it. Just just
Yeah.
just give it to me.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of books when I was in school that, because it was an assignment, I kind of spark noted my way through it or something like that. And I would like to read it again, actually paying attention as, I would hope a better reader now. um,
Oh man, if they only
would like to
taught like
revisit.
Huckleberry Finn in high schools, I think more kids would start reading. That's a great book.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's more like,
Though there is a lot
I,
of racial words in it, even though it's very
mhm.
anti-racist.
Yeah. I
Even
feel like when you're that young, though, when you're reading something that feels classic, you're like, this is from old people. Like, I don't want. Why am I reading books by old people? Like, I think,
yeah,
So I think it's important to read those, but I don't know if there's a cure for sometimes spark noting a book in high school. Like, I don't. I think that there's definitely a way to have someone continue to adore reading. I think there's better ways to teach so that that love doesn't go away. But I do think that there's just an inevitability of like high school students be like, nah,
I did
there's
Spark
spark
Note
notes.
through. I actually read this on my downtime, so I read Scarlet Letter.
Mm-hmm.
I just
No,
could not do it.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Just
Nope.
could not do it.
Nope. The only thing that I remember hating worse than that was Catcher in the Rye. I
Yeah,
loathe that book.
yeah, that's a book. I
It is a
remember
book.
I
It
read
is
it
that.
and I'm like, I kind of feel bad for this kid, but he's kind of a doofus. I can't like ugh. He's
My
like that. He's
sympathy,
like that. I'm not like other kids type. I just oh man. I know he's going
my
through a
sympathy
really
got
bad
yeeted
time.
out the window in like the first chapter. I was like, absolutely not. So no. So I would try Scarlet Letter again. I remember hating it, but again, I've only read it the one time. I was in high school. Catcher in the Rye, I will never. Nope.
I couldn't, and I don't mind ornate prose, but when you go too far with it, I'm just like, oh god. I like Puritans. The book I wrote, the book I'm editing right now, has
Oh,
warrior
cool.
Puritans in it. So like, I don't know what happened there, and like,
I didn't know you were writing a book. That's cool.
it's like there's a like, it's weird because like the story isn't that bad. It's just the language I don't like that much in
Mm,
that book.
Mm-mm-mm-mm. Yeah. So
Anyway,
what? I'm just curious, what inspired you to finally, not finally, maybe you've been writing your whole life. Let me not use that word, to write a story now. Like, what was your?
well, it's a bit of a story. No, but
Oh, okay,
no.
okay. Well, you can do
Well,
the Spark Notes, Cliff Notes version if you'd like. That's you.
I'll give the Spark Notes version. So,
Okay.
I read The Great Gatsby when I was in middle school, and
Okay.
I was like, I want to be a writer for the rest of my life after I read that book.
Mm, mm.
A few years go by, and I kind of dragged my feet on actually writing something, except for a really bad zombie novel I wrote when I was really on that Walking Dead fever. Um,
Gotcha.
um, so I was kind of dragging my feet. I talked to my friend Josh, the same Josh Pantalresco, and he's like, "Just do it, man. Quit.
Mm.
You're just making up excuses now."
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, "Fuck you."
Yeah.
Fine. So I started writing it, and I finished it.
Okay. Okay. So how do you feel about it? Is it one that's going to stay in the vault and then you're going to build off of it, or are you thinking it might see the light of day one day?
Oh, I'm definitely editing it right now, so I am hoping for it to see the light of day. I just don't know how it's going to. I don't know if I'm gonna self pub it or if I'm
Mm-mm.
going to see if the traditional pubs are gonna take a small town mystery with warrior Puritans and weird dream shenanigans.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's a good pitch. Good elevator pitch. You got that down.
um, well, there's not the main character isn't a warrior Puritan, but he's tasked by a warrior Puritan to go figure out what's going on.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah.
Sounds unique and interesting, though. I mean, that's a whole different set of skill, a whole different strength to be able to put your work out into the world. Like, it's just that's something I don't have in me. I don't have writing a book in me, I don't think.
Oh, it took
So I
me
have
a
a lot of
long time
respect
to
for people who
finally
do.
like muster get going, and I finally did it.
Mm.
I'm very pleased.
Well, no matter what happens in the future, that's a huge accomplishment to be able to get
Yeah,
what you wanted down on paper.
I've thought about doing I've thought about going self pub because like I'm like this book is so weird and out there. I don't know if like Orbit's gonna take it. To be honest with you.
I mean, you could always try, but I don't think self pub needs to be like I tried for trad pub and I didn't succeed, therefore self pub. Self pub. Speaking of the person I'm reading right now, of Darkness and Light, Ryan Cahill, it, he is huge. He's massive. His entire life, his career is writing now, and he's self pub. So it's not like you know, it's not like it has to be a backup thing. I think it's well worth your time to invest in self pubbing if you wanted to.
Yeah, I've thought about it because like there's this community, and I also have this YouTube channel now, and there might be people
Yeah.
who want to read it, and there's also someone on the BookTube sphere. If I do want to do an audiobook, I would love for him specifically to do it.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I'm definitely, but there's also other friends like, oh, you're gonna be throwing your writing away if you do that, and I,
Mm.
I'm still editing it. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with said friends that say you're throwing your writing away because I don't think that's true.
Hey, that's all
So,
I mean, I see Tori's doing it. I see Phillips doing it. And
yeah,
there's other people
Tori,
doing it,
Philip,
and they seem to be
Yell.
doing okay. Now I know it's not like a. I know it's like not like a straight bet, but there's people doing it, and they're doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, also, writing is not what you would get into if you want a huge paycheck right away.
Well,
Like,
no.
I'm sorry to burst your bubble. That's what people are looking for, but this is not the space for that.
That was the
Um,
first thing I learned. I'm like, you don't do this because you want like to get famous. There's
no,
way
no, no.
easier ways to do that.
Oh, yes. And that's goes for writing in BookTube as well, which I know that you know. It's such a small niche already of the YouTube space. So you do it because you love it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I hate to go all like, oh, this poetic stuff, but it is kind of a calling in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, I agree. Not only like for BookTube, not only do you have to get not better, but well, I guess better is the right word. Better at reviewing or articulating your thoughts. It takes a lot of time to edit. It takes a lot of effort to sit down and film and then edit and then plan the video before you do it. There's just a lot that goes into creating a channel that I think people don't see on the other side. So yeah, it is something that you calling might sound dramatic, but I think it's something you're called to do.
I see you have Rage of Dragons back there. Is that worth a
Yeah.
read? Because I have the book right over there, but I read Black Leopard Red Wolf, and I'm afraid that my love for that book will ruin my experience reading Rage of Dragons.
Well, here's the thing. From what I know of Black Leopard, Red Wolf, it's very different from Rage of Dragons. So Rage of Dragons is, I would almost call it a military fantasy because there's a shit ton of battles. Lots of battle scenes. Well-written battle scenes, but a lot of them. So just, I would say be prepared for that. I think
I heard it was like a revenge story.
Oh, it is. There's just a lot of murdering and battles that happen alongside revenge. So there is a plot to it for sure. But our main character, he is one-track minded in this revenge that he wants. And so it makes him make some dumbass decisions. And you're like, what?
Well,
Come on.
You wouldn't have a story if they made smart decisions all the time.
Exactly. And so a lot of those decisions lead to where he ends up being. The one thing I would say is there are dragons, but not in the sense of like, they're not on every page. Right. So just don't go into it expecting like, dragon riders with Pern or whatever.
Dragons aren't even my favorite monster, but that's good to know.
Yeah. So just because it has dragon in the name, I think some people go into it thinking like, oh, we're going to get dragons everywhere. And they are there, but it's not, I think, what people expect. So yeah, I would say go into it when you're ready to read a lot of bloodshed and revenge, bloody revenge.
Well,
I think it's definitely worth it. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. So
yeah, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, I want to read more like diverse, like I like Jade City, or even the Dandelion Dynasty at some point. I don't. That's another one. Maybe I'll save for 2025, but no promises, people.
Yeah. Well, I think making the conscious choice to want to do that little by little is a beautiful thing. I think that's a great idea.
I was going to do it in 2021, but I had a big reading slump that year, so it wasn't fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's again, it's not something that you have to like click your fingers and suddenly you know exactly where to start and what you're going to be picking up. But another one that, it's dark though. So if you're in the mood for dark, Gunmetal Gods is another one that has cosmic horror. It's a Middle Eastern fantasy. Yeah, Middle Eastern, Game of Thrones vibes, cosmic horror thrown in there. Great. And then P. Jelly Clark as well. And I'm trying to think if there's any. Ken Liu, who wrote the Dandelion Dynasty. If you want to try, he has some short fiction here, which is The Paper Menagerie.
Yeah, I think Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads is all like, oh man, that's some good
Ken
stuff.
Liu he's a fucking genius. He's also someone that I've been blessed to be able to talk to. He's so goddamn smart. I could listen to that man talk all day.
Actually, I did read one of his short stories. It was one that was adapted into Love, Death, and Robots. It was the it was the steampunk one. I really enjoyed that story a lot. I'm like, why didn't you make this a whole novel? I want to read more of that.
So Ken Liu either writes really short things or really long things. He doesn't do anything in between. So he has like this collection of short stories. But also, if you want to try more of his stuff for free, he has a story on Tor.com called The Passing of the Dragon. You can read it like when you're drinking your coffee. That changed the trajectory of my, I wouldn't say life, but of like that week that I read it. It's stuck in my brain and it's free. So I would highly recommend him if you're looking to diversify and try some other stuff. Oh, don't fall, please. This is what I get for taking books off my shelf without previous planning.
Yeah, but there's always so many books. So many books. Like Haruki
Yeah, so many books, a little time, right?
Yeah.
But it's an endless cycle.
I mean, you've read Murakami, so is he any good?
He is good. He's weird. Just you got to know that. I would not start with what I started with, which is IQ 84. I haven't read like most of his works. Like I haven't read his backlist, his whole backlist or whatever. But he has a haunting simplicity to his writing. Like, it's not purple prosy, but I don't know how to describe it. It has this like liminal feel to it. I feel like he's a writer who exists in liminal spaces and writes about them.
Yeah, I always get irritated when I hear people go like, "Oh, he doesn't write women well."
Well, he doesn't.
Okay.
So don't read it for that.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's strong female characters. I don't know anymore.
Well, I think that this idea of a strong female character has become so like
Become a meme.
one size fits all. It's become a meme almost, yeah. Where there's only one type of strength that's allowed to be shown, or you have to be able to do XYZ to fit that mold. And so I don't think when people say that he doesn't write female characters well, they're not saying that he doesn't write strong female characters. He's saying that he writes one-dimensional female characters, because he does. They just like exist in the story. So just don't read him for that.
Oh,
okay. So
he writes a lot
you
about
can enjoy
loneliness.
everything else.
So I heard he writes a lot about loneliness. So
lots of loneliness. There's a lot of like repetitive scenes, like doing repetitive daily tasks, but the point is to make you feel that monotony. So whereas some authors might want you to see the beauty in the daily things, for example, How Do You Live, behind me is another translated work, kind of takes that more enjoying the simple things view. Murakami, I think, has a different view on that.
Interesting.
So
I heard he's very heard he's very approachable to Western audiences.
Yeah. Sometimes he throws some weird sexual shit in there, and you're like, "Why is this here?" But you can skip over those parts. But
I remember. I think Jimmy was going off about like, why is there like menstrual stuff in this?
Yeah, I think he's definitely worth it if you want to look at it from like a speculative lens. Just you want something weird, something different, you could give him a shot.
I hate that term, magical realism, though.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It's like graphic novel. It's just like a phrase people use, or at least I think of it like this. You may have a different opinion, but it's just like, oh, it's like I feel it's kind of self-conscious,
I see. Do you think it's become like a catch-all term?
Yeah, it's basically, I feel it's like for people who don't want to admit they read fantasy. It's kind of like that.
That's not a wrong observation in some cases, for sure.
No, I'm sure. Now I know there's like a tradition of like magical realism from like Central America. But I haven't read anything about that, so I don't really know.
100 Years of Solitude and all that. Yeah, I do think that. I think you're right that it can be.
I'm not saying it's a legit genre. I'm not saying it isn't a legit genre, but it's just kind of.
No, I think you're right. I think it can be used for people to avoid the label of fantasy at certain times.
Shooting the guns again, shooting the shots again. It's gonna be a fun one.
Your comment section's gonna be going off. Well, actually.
But yeah, no, I don't really like that term very much. Anyway.
That's fine. You're allowed to have your opinions. We all have them.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I guess for magical realism, I don't know too much about the genre itself, like the strict definition of what would fit what the genre supposedly is. But from my knowledge of it, Murakami would match that, because it's like, again, I hate to use the word liminal again, but I can't think of another one to describe it. You don't know if you're in this world or another one. It's very blendy. And he doesn't care to explain it to you either way. So
fair enough.
So he's worth it, I think.
Yeah,
not my favorite.
Someday. I'll
yeah, right. The years-long TBR.
Yeah. Anyway, it's getting kind of late where I'm at. And,
yeah. I saw the sun disappear from your window behind you.
I got it. Time now. But no, I mean, I have enjoyed this conversation, though. Thank you for being patient with me. And
no, not at all. I enjoyed myself, too. I really appreciate you having me. Truly. had a good time.
But as I do before these things are over, if you want to share your social media or anything like that, feel free.
Okay, let's see. My channel is Maed Between the Pages, which you can see below. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, you can find the page chewing interview series. There's a playlist there already with a lot of the names that have been mentioned here. We do lives, so you can, if you can catch us live, you can leave questions and comments in the chat, and we'll engage with you in that way. Like I said, also I make a bunch of different videos on my channel, book reviews, all of that. Please feel free to check that out. I'm also an assistant editor over on Before We Go blog, which is a book blog. And I'm also part of the Spiffbo team over there as well. So Spiffbo, or Spiffbox, Spiffbo 10 just took off. So we're going to have our reviews start to come out next month. Anything else? I guess a lot of my socials, I do have a Patreon. All of those socials for my Twitter, Patreon, Instagram, all of those things are in the description box in my videos. And I would love to see you over there.
All right. Well, again, thank you for being very generous with your time, and we should do this again, as I like to say.
Yeah, consider me down.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of, well, whenever this goes up. But have a good rest of your day.